Ubisoft is reporting Assassin's Creed Shadows has reached 2 million players after the first weekend following the game's launch. Now, mind you, this is 2 million players have played the game, not necessarily that they've sold 2 million copies. And while I do have my reason to suggest that those numbers aren't necessarily accurate, I don't really have any proof to say that they're not. So just for the sake of argument, let's assume that they are genuine and that 2 million people have in fact played this game. Does that mean it's great news for Ubisoft? Well, it's not bad necessarily, but it's also not great either. Yet there are some people in game media out there who are basically trying to make it seem like it's a lot more than what it actually is. Assassin's Creed Shadows hits 2 million players, putting it on track to be the series' most successful game yet. Now that's the headline from PC Gamer I got pulled up. Just 3 days after its release date, Assassin's Creed Shadows has hit yet another milestone and passed 2 million players. According to Ubisoft, Assassin's Creed Shadows has now surpassed the launches of AC Origins and Odyssey. Now that is good news for them, obviously, if they can surpass the launch of those other entries in their franchise. Yet you got to keep in mind this is the most expensive game in the Assassin's Creed franchise to date. I believe it actually has around double the production budget of these other games it's mentioned here. So if it just had a little bit more players during its opening week than these other ones, I would say that's probably not a good sign, because since they had double the budget, then I guess that would mean they would need to have double the player count. And so far, they're not even claiming that that's where they've actually gotten. Shadows has already sailed past 1 million players in its first 24 hours, easily breaking AC Valhalla's record. To put that into perspective, when Valhalla were released in 2020, Ubisoft claimed it was the biggest PC launch ever, although the game's Steam player base remained smaller than other games in the AC franchise. 5 years later, Shadows seems to have eclipsed even that. And a large part of that is attributed to the fact that this is the first, or not the first, but this is an Assassin's Creed game that has same day and date release on Steam as it did on consoles. It even goes into that in this article, saying how AC Valhalla wasn't released on PC until sometime later. So you can see why the player base on PC would eclipse the player base of Assassin's Creed Valhalla if Assassin's Creed Valhalla didn't have the same release as it did on the consoles, because by the time people wanted to play it on PC, they've already probably had it on a console by then. This record-breaking wave of players at launch is thanks in part to the fact that Ubisoft didn't wait to release Shadows on Steam. Valhalla didn't arrive on Steam until a full 2 years after its original release date. So I will give this article credit for mentioning that, because other outlets have chose to gloss over that fact. And I think it is kind of important when you look at whether or not it's being successful. That may explain why Valhalla has far fewer players on Steam than Shadows, Odyssey, and Origins, which were all available on Steam at launch. At the time of writing, Shadows' all-time peak concurrent player count on Steam is hovering just over 60,000, within spitting distance of Odyssey's record of 62,069, but far beyond Origins' 41,551 and Valhalla's 15,679. If Shadows continues to attract new players at this rate, it could pass Odyssey's record in a matter of days. In fact, Shadows is on track to be one of the biggest games releases of the year. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 was hailed as a hit earlier this year and took 2 weeks to hit 2 million players, a milestone Shadows reached in just a few days. Now, this is the kind of stuff that makes me pause and question whether or not they actually did reach 2 million players. But like I said, I'm just going to assume that they're being genuine in that. It's just the nature of the 2 million players is what I'm also going to question about this too. And I think that is fair bringing up when diving into the business side of this sort of thing, because keep in mind, they say it has right now a little over 60,000 concurrent players on Steam. I got those numbers pulled up, and the all-time peak for them was just under 65,000, excuse me. Now, for a game of this size, you would think that the player count on Steam would be significantly higher than what we're seeing right here. Going back to Kingdom Come Deliverance, something that it brought up in that article, you can see upon its release, it launched at over 176,000 concurrent players, and then it jumped up in the next few days to around 250,000, something that we should expect if Assassin's Creed Shadows was kind of along the same pace as Kingdom Come Deliverance, would be seeing about 250,000 concurrent players, but yeah, they're getting around a quarter of that. So not a good sign for them, but they still insist that they have more, or they've reached more audiences than what we saw with Kingdom Come Deliverance. Now, keep in mind the biggest difference between these two games right here is Ubisoft also has Ubisoft Plus, so people who are already subscribed can get a chance to play the game without any extra charge. So when they're talking about 2 million people playing the game, I'm wondering, what do they mean by that? Do they mean, because obviously it's not 2 million people have bought copies of it, because if that's the case, they would be saying they've sold 2 million copies, and they're not even trying to make that claim. So I'm thinking it's 2 million people played it, which means they probably downloaded it, checked it out, and we don't know what after that. Do they play it for like a couple hours, decide that they didn't like it, and that's it? Or have they continued to play it, or maybe they're going to buy a copy later on? We just don't know about this. Now, this isn't to say that the game is necessarily bad. There's a lot of people out there who are playing it who say that they like the game. And if you like the game, well, then good for you. Don't let me take that away from you. You're allowed to like it. I'm just talking about whether or not the game is truly successful or not. And when you look at those numbers that are being reported, like I've said, there's some reason to suggest that it is successful, but then there's other reasons to suggest that it's not. That's why I like to bring up the Steam concurrent player count, because we don't have any verifiable data when it comes to what people are playing on Ubisoft Plus, or even the sales figures. All we have is what Ubisoft is saying, and it is kind of a trust me bro sort of thing. But if you want to trust them, there is a lot of ways you can interpret the numbers that they're given. And like I said, it's either really popular amongst those 2 million players, or just those 2 million players who are willing to sample it. And that's pretty much it. Looking over on Metacritic, you can see the user score is kind of mediocre for a game like this. Looking further into these user numbers, breaking it down by platform that they're playing it on. So you got PlayStation 5 that has the most people who are playing it. And you can just see that reflected in the amount of people who've actually rated it on here. Xbox is last place, and that's, again, there's far fewer people rating it for Xbox than for PlayStation. PC is in the middle, and this is where you'll get people playing it on Steam and other places like that. And as I showed you, the Steam player count is extremely low for this game. So I find it hard to believe that the only numbers that we have to go off of that are verifiable, the Steam numbers, are just abysmally low for a game of this scale, yet they're trying to make it seem as if this game is just doing gangbusters right now. And maybe it's true that everyone who plays Assassin's Creed game just plays it on the PlayStation 5, and that's about it. And that's why you see so low numbers on Steam, why you see so few reviews on Xbox. That is a possibility, but with the numbers that we have right now, we just don't know. It just looks as if Ubisoft is trying to put some type of spin on it, because this is a game that they need to have be a huge success for them. Shadow success is a much needed win for Ubisoft, which had a rough year in 2024 and was relying on Shadows to turn things around. After a string of flops like Star Wars Outlaws and Skull and Bones, Shadows is a breath of fresh air that couldn't have come at a better time. Ubisoft is reportedly in talks with Tencent to invest in a new IP until that will include Assassin's Creed franchise. This deal could give Tencent, already one of Ubisoft's largest shareholders, an even bigger hand in controlling future Assassin's Creed games. Shadow's success may help bolster Ubisoft's confidence and hold off a full-on ownership change at the company. And that's the big takeaway from all this, because unlike those other games, Skull and Bones, Star Wars Outlaws, we know that those were failures, but there was really no way they could deny that they were failures. This one, though, the future of the company, or at least the current leadership at the company, is contingent on whether or not this game turns out to be a success. And they have all the reason in the world to try to put as positive a spin on it as possible. Now, whether or not this saves Ubisoft remains to be seen, because even if it is successful, what really matters is what are the shareholders gonna do to this. Right now, as of before closing last weekend, we saw that the shares for the company have kind of dipped down a little bit because, well, the game launched, so I think a lot of the time they were just waiting to see how this game performs. over the weekend. Now it's just opening up and it's looking like it's starting to shoot up a little bit. So maybe there are some investor confidence within the game and it will help them in the short term. But once we start seeing long term what happens with this, then we'll actually know whether or not the game truly was successful for them. So at the end of the day, if we see the stock value for the company is up, then that suggests that whether or not the game was good or whether or not it was successful, the shareholders bought into it. So that's going to help Ubisoft in the short term. But if the stock value isn't really high, then it suggests that the shareholders are not convinced, and that could be disaster for Ubisoft, even if this game did actually reach 2 million players like they said it was. But let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. Do you think video game companies like Ubisoft should be more transparent in the actual reporting of their numbers, or should it just be like this where they just report them and you just have to go by what they say? Because personally, I like transparency. That's why I like the Steam numbers. I think we should also have verifiable figures on all the other platforms too. But until then, it's just kind of going and taking them at their word. And also, if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest entertainment news. And don't forget to click that like button and share this video out there because it really helps out with the channel. Thank you.